Good morning, everyone. Just before I get started, this is my first time at one of these conferences, and I think I'm in a really lucky position here just before the keynote speaker to just, from a participant and an attendee at this session, I think it's been a wonderful session, very well organized, no glitches. I've had a lot of fun meeting the Knime staff and all the people who are using it. So I just want to say a big thank you from myself and everybody else to the Knime team that put it together. Okay, so my name is Gupta. As Cynthia introduced me, I'm the director of BI and analytics at a company called BGIS. I'll explain about my background, about BGIS, and how we've used Knime within the finance department for various self-service applications, and a couple of use cases that I put through, in particular with regards to geospatial analysis. So about me, as Cynthia mentioned, I've got an aeronautical engineer master's, a master's of management analytics, which is sort of a layer above data science. For those of you who are in the machine learning class on Tuesday, this would be the kind of person who does quantitative decision sciences, not too much into the code, but someone who wants to translate complex problems into solutions. And that's where the Master of Management Analytics comes into play. My background is in investment banking, and I'll talk about why these are important. In investment banking, I learned a lot of Excel. I did a lot of cash flow statements. I did a lot of leveraged buyout models. So I was an expert at Excel by the end of that. I worked in aerospace defense, so that was designing air-to-air refueling drogues using computer-aided design packages. So I got familiar with computer packages and how to be effective with them. At Arthur D. Little, which is a management consulting firm, I worked with clients on solving business problems. So I got exposed to how do you solve business problems effectively. And then in Canada, I worked for Direct Energy, which is now a Texas-based company, I think. I worked for Starbucks Canada, and now I'm at BGIS. So what is BGIS? It's an integrated facility management company, and to make it simple, we look after buildings, right? Everything to do with the building. We look after problems in the building. We look after big enhancements to the building, and we deliver services for clients that don't want to spend their time looking after buildings. So we have about 230 million square feet under management across the world, $2.5 billion in managed spend. We deliver cost savings for our clients so that when they come to us as a company, they're getting the best value for their money. We service 25,000 locations, and we have 5,000 team members across the country and across the world, and we've been 25 years plus in business. We have 5 major lines of business. The first one is facility management services, and this is really the core of what we do. So in simple terms, anytime there's a problem in the building, someone will give us a call, and we will get that problem fixed. Project delivery is large capital projects, so we will do retrofits, we will tear up the building and build a whole new building, etc. Workplace solutions is regarding floor plans, so we plan floors so that they are in line with the strategy of how that business wants to operate. Professional services looks after assessing, engineering, and installing products within buildings. And then real estate services is looking after leases, lease administration, and getting commercial companies into commercial properties. So I've got some numbers here in terms of the type of business that we do and the volume. $800 million in FMS subcontract to us annually, 1 million work orders per year. So a large volume of information. Each of those work orders has information tagged to it. So a work order has a date. It has a vendor that services that work order. And when the work was done, what the resolution was, there's a bunch of text. There's a whole bunch of information that comes with each and every work order. For project delivery services, again, these are the capital projects, $800 million of projects managed per year, over 10,000 projects. Drawings, we manage over 300,000 drawings. Professional services, we look after utility meters, and this is another really interesting line of business. We get into sensor data here. When we install things like new HVAC, heating, ventilation, and air conditioning units, we sometimes attach sensors to them, and so this is where time series comes into play, potentially. We do massive retrofit programs every year. And then in terms of real estate services, this is getting clients into commercial properties, and we manage their leases for them. Just a quick slider in terms of our reach. So we were based in Canada, but we're really expanding in the US right now. So you'll see that Canada is pretty much covered by us as a service provider, and we're starting to grow in the US. So just in terms of how did Knime get started at BGIS, and it's a really interesting story. So I sit in the finance department of my company, and I would spend my days looking at stuff like this. Does this look familiar to everyone? I would see this all the time, right? So, with my master's degree, I sort of got introduced to R. So I went into R and tried to do some very basic stuff. And then I started to see stuff like this, right? And for anybody who's done data science, you can go onto Google and fix those. But if you don't have time, you don't have time. You want to get the problem solved. So funnily enough, I started to investigate another tool, a competitor. And I guess the reason I fell into Knime was because the license was expensive. As soon as it hit procurement, it sort of fell through the cracks, and nobody wanted to pay the bill. So I started looking for another solution. So I have a 40-minute commute to work each day, and I listen to podcasts, and they're typically analytical podcasts because that's what I love. I came across this podcast. It looks a little bit non-professional, and it kind of is. They make a lot of jokes of that, and they swear a lot, and they drink beer while they're doing the podcast, so it's pretty cool. Anyway, so this podcast, at the end of the podcast, they have this section. It's called Last Call, and it goes well with the logo. It's a last call for drinks, right? But they talk about what are the cool things that these podcast presenters, what have they come across? And one of the presenters is an Australian woman who got a very thick accent, and she's like, there's this tool called Knime. It's really cool. You should go check it out. And just me being curious, I went to the office and checked it out. And I stumbled across the Gartner Magic Quadrant. I don't think I need to explain this to any of you, but top right corner of the leaders quadrant. And the competitor that I was about to sign up with is sort of in that quadrant too, but it didn't work out. So podcasts can be useful. You never know where you're going to get cool information. So I started to play with Knime, and this is one of the cool things about Knime. I'm sure many of you will agree. For those of you who have used Knime, it doesn't take long to learn the tool. I went from a zero experience with the tool to advanced. I call it advanced because I'm really not as advanced as some of the other presenters that have come here over the last couple of days, but that was my first workflow, and I built that in 2 weeks. And the reason it's messy and ugly is because that's how you start. Before you know what to do with it, you build something crazy, and then you start to optimize it. But you'll see in here there's some kind of interesting things. So I've got flow variables, the red lines. I've got these blue boxes and the red box. And really, to get there, I just had to take 2 courses. So I've got to say at this point, thank you to Catherine for your advanced Knime training course, which I took online because you don't service Toronto yet as in person. And Rosario, in terms of your natural language processing class, the blue boxes from there come from your topic modeling workflow. So I basically just stole your work, and I applied it to my business. And just going back to the quantitative decision sciences, this was actually solving a problem. We had a client that had done a lighting retrofit. And a lighting retrofit, is good, but they wanted to prove the value. What was the business case, and did we actually deliver that value in that lighting retrofit? Now, it's a little bit more complicated because with a lighting retrofit, yes, you can measure the energy easily, but they wanted to understand how many fewer truck rolls did we do to service those new lights, okay? So how many times less did we go to service those lights? Basically, how many times fewer did those lights burn out? And that's not something that you have a tabular data record for, right? The other thing is the lighting retrofit wasn't changing from light type A to light type B. It was changing from light type A1 to light type A2. So it was a type of fluorescent tube light that went from an old model to a new model. So it's still a fluorescent tube light, and we don't categorize the service we do based at that level of detail. So I had to get into the text. And what was happening before I got involved in this project was This is going back to, I think, the Siemens team yesterday. Somebody was manually reading through the work orders and trying to categorize them, right? And it was 30,000 work orders. Okay, so a little bit, better ways of doing things. And the other thing was there was a few nuances with this project. So a couple of things were that not all the sites got the retrofit, only some of them did. And the other thing is not all sites got the retrofit at the same time. They were spread out over 2 years. So even if one site got the retrofit today, the savings from that retrofit, if you looked at it in aggregate, was getting offset by the non-savings in the other site. And so the analysis that was being done before, because it was such a large volume of data, everything was getting aggregated. So you were losing the positives and negatives. They were just washing each other out. And we weren't able to prove the savings as clearly as we should have been. So the first thing I did was basically come up with a baseline. So when did the retrofit happen? And that's sort of this line here oops, I need to get used to this mouse. But that line is when the retrofit happened for those 500 sites. And I looked at the cost before, and I looked at the cost after. And it's very clear that there's a drop, right? But the client's going to ask, prove to me that this drop in lighting, this is all lighting, by the way, prove to me that this drop was driven by the fluorescent tube light you changed from type A1 to type A2. And that's not so simple, because we don't keep that level of detail as a record. So this is where topic modeling comes into play. And I had to read through the description of every single work order and all the resolutions for each of those work orders to understand what was done and build sort of the topics around that. So, topic modeling is an unsupervised learning technique. It takes a little bit of the bias out of the analysis, but then the results are not always 100% accurate. You have to give it some trust. You have to validate the results that come out in those topics, read some of the work orders and just make sure that they're doing what they are, check the probabilities, and just do the best you can to make sure you're capturing in and out of scope work effectively. So in the first case there, ceiling height standard fluorescent. So a fluorescent tube light was changed at the ceiling height. Very, very easy to understand. That was in scope. That was something the retrofit was designed to do, to reduce those types of work orders. The second was bring ladder fluorescent bulb, again, related to fluorescent tube lights. So this is all happening in the pre-section. Like before the retrofit happened, all these work orders and these themes of work orders are happening sort of there in the pre-section. Once we did the retrofit, again, I ran the topic modeling post-retrofit. And you start to see that the issues, the red ones there, which were in scope, which were the things the retrofit was supposed to solve, they've gone down the list. They're no longer the big deal. And so, okay, we can prove that the number of problems related to that fluorescent tube light dropped before and after. But then the question became, how do you quantify that? So by overlaying the topics with the actual work orders, you're able to clearly see that the problems that were being caused before with the fluorescent tube lights are no longer the problems that are being caused after. And this is a Tableau visualization, but all the work that went into this decision was done in Knime, right? Tableau is just visualizing it. But it's a very clear and compelling argument to say, we did the retrofit delivered savings, the savings were delivered by the retrofit and not something else. So in terms of decisions, the client takes this information, goes and makes further decisions around how they want to do further retrofits. Do they want to change those fluorescents to a pot light, so whatever. And how should they do that better in the future? So I did that that use case, and then I said, this is too cool for me to keep to myself. I need to share it with the rest of the team. So I started a competition. The competition was called the Finance Innovation Challenge, and I challenged the finance teams. We have 65 or whatever clients. I challenged each team to take a problem and automate it using Knime. And we came up with some really cool results. Okay? And most of these are talking about time savings, but one team looked at reconciling check payments. They used fuzzy matching. They were given 2 months, by the way, for this project. They saved 2 months of time per year on just that one task using Knime. They were doing this manually. Another team automated financial reporting. This was self-service data prep, and they saved 1 month on an annualized basis. The third team automated client invoicing. They used Knime and BERT. They saved 1 month of reporting time. And then and so on and so forth. And the last one, their purchase order accrual automation. This is using Knime to create files, sending the files out to the field, getting field input, and then including that input in the final decision. So these are just some examples of time savings that we saw just due to this competition. The competition also introduced us to some new vocabulary. So finance vocabulary is pretty boring and dull. You talk about accruals and debits and credits. It's not, you don't really want to hear that all the time. So anyway, we came up with some new language. The first one was Knime. But Knime as a verb, okay? To use Knime to automate a process. And these are the types of things I hear around the office now. I wish I could Knime my morning routine, right? So people think about this in terms of just getting things done effectively. The second one is Ninja, right? And this is a member of a team trained in the art of using Knime to elegantly automate and efficiently analyze ridiculous amounts of data. So with that competition, I had really found those super users who wanted to go above and beyond with Knime. They wanted to demonstrate their capability. They wanted to be the experts. And they were called the ninjas. So they got a little flag there that they stick at their desk. And it's basically saying, hey, I'm good with Knime. Come and ask me any question you want. I'm going to get you over the hump. And so this is sort of the centralized, they're not really centralized. They each work in their own accounts. But this team really supports the rest of the business in getting up to speed. I don't have to be there myself. They can take care of it. If they can't deal with it, they come to me or they go to the forum or whatever. So that's my sort of support network. Over the last year, so I started in June 2018 is the first time I came across Knime. I trained over 100 users internally. I have those 20 ninjas, of which you only saw 8. And I'm starting training. So I'm in finance, but I'm going to teach the IT department about a technology tool, which is pretty cool. You don't normally get to hear that. Well, I'm going to be teaching the IT team how to use Knime next. I have a training session on Wednesday. I've got 400 people on my email list, so that might be another big jump there. These are some things that we're getting out of Knime today, which are automation, error reduction, auditability, because the workflows, you can fully document them. Time savings, we can centralize, because even though we have 65 clients, a lot of that work is standard. We can centralize it. This is an example of another professional services application. I'm not going to go into this too much, but essentially what happened here is I've got 15-minute interval sensor data. I processed it all through Knime. And I just wanted to show savings. So before the HVAC retrofit, this is heating, ventilation, air conditioning. The average consumption per hour was the yellow line. There's a regression to say that we're able to predict consumption effectively. And then post retrofit, post HVAC retrofit, which is this line here, but before lighting retrofit. So this, I'm comparing the green and the yellow. And I'm able to prove that my regression equations match the actual consumption very well. So ultimately, I'm able to calculate what the consumption would have been had we not done the retrofit and calculate the savings. So again, I'm supporting a client decision as to how many of these retrofits should they do, how much should they expect to save. Again, all of this being done in Knime. Tableau is just a visual. And then there's lots of other use cases there. I'm not going to go through them because I'm running out of time. But needless to say, across the finance organization, there's hundreds of applications. I don't touch Excel anymore, even though that's what I started with as a data management tool. In terms of next steps, I'm going to be taking the team into BERT invoicing. I'm training, so it's a funny story here. My CFO visited Australia, where we have one of our offices. And he's actually recruiting teams from Australia to be taught how to learn Knime. So he called me up, and he's like, can you teach the Australia team how to use Knime? So it's really cool, because my CFO is the one who's going out there and finding me leads, right? Very different to what you'd expect. In the future, I'm expecting to get into the Knime server and Knime on Azure, especially as we deal with big data and sensor information. So I've got a few minutes left. I'm just going to talk about geospatial analysis really quickly. This is another use case that BGIS is developing. And the business question here we're trying to answer is, which market presents the greatest opportunity for BGIS to expand its service offering into? And within that market, are there any specific areas you should target? So it's quite a broad question. First problem here is collecting the data. The data doesn't all exist within BGIS systems, so it has to be collected externally. There's not a large budget for this, so there have to be ways to solve that problem. The second thing is cleaning data. Because you get data from different sources, it's not always standardized. So you have to figure out a way to standardize it so you can build your ABT, your analytical base tables, upon which you design your analytics. You also want to prioritize because some sources are better than others. You want to make those higher priority sources. And you want to remove duplicates. This is, sounds easy, but in geospatial terms, it's maybe not a clear problem how to solve, so it took me a bit of time to figure that out. Then you want to perform the geospatial analysis, which is essentially, if I have buildings in a geospatial area, a polygon or shapefile, I want to count the number of buildings within each shape, and then understand how many of those buildings are we the service provider, and how many of those buildings are we not the service provider. So that just gives me a sense of the opportunity in the market. And then obviously, I need to send this out to the business. So they need to make the decisions, but I'm doing the analysis work for them. So the first step was collecting the data. So you can see now here, my Knime workflows have cleaned up a little bit. But here what I'm doing is I'm essentially just taking address information from various sources. And I'm using the Knime workflow Google REST API, which is sort of structured like this, with a constant value, and then you replace the constant value with components of the address, and then you're ultimately ending up with a geocoded data set. So every site has a lat and long added to it. Because BGIS doesn't have all the available market sites in our database, I also use Google API to get that information for the rest of the country. So there's about 15,000 sites in the country at this point. The next step is harmonizing the data. So this is basically creating standardization and prioritization of data so that let's say the top data source there would be BGIS data, because we know we service those sites. So it's a higher priority in terms of information than something scraped off the Google API, because we don't know whether we service that site or not. Third thing is duplicate removal. So duplicate removal is interesting because from the multiple sites, you have slight differences in latitude and longitude. And so duplicates have to be found with a different method. They're not clear-cut. You can't just say that if this equals that, it's a duplicate. So I use the dbScan clustering algorithm to figure out within a 40-meter radius of each site, what are the other sites that fall within that space. So that becomes a cluster. And then within each cluster, define which of the sites within those clusters is the best site to take based off the source prioritization. So we have 3 sites here. They're all labeled slightly differently. The lats and longs are slightly different. But ultimately, this is the best source. It's source number 2. And also, we have to infer that from source number 3, BGIS was the service provider. That means that in that cluster, BGIS is the service provider. It doesn't matter that I got it from that source or not that source. I have to sort of infer it. So Knime does all that. The next thing is tagging sites to geospatial polygons. So again, with the market penetration exercise, you need to identify sites within a polygon. And so this is a workflow. This is in Knime. I'm not entirely sure if these are partner nodes. But essentially what I'm doing here is I'm taking site IDs, which is the lats and longs. I'm taking a polygon shapefile reader. And then I'm saying, use these nodes to figure out which polygon does each site belong to. So I end up with a result like this, where every site has an associated polygon. And in this case, the polygons are Canada election areas. And finally, you come up with a business-friendly output because the business has to make a decision. And that's the business-friendly output. And what it's got, the business can select This is just one dashboard out of the many. The business can select what territory are they interested in. Within that territory, they have some market stats. So in this case, BGIS services 33 sites. There's 308, so we have an 11% penetration based on site count. In terms of profit, we know we have $1.8 million off the profit per year. The total profitability is a predicted profitability at 18 million, so we have 10% off the market in terms of profit. Identify the top opportunity areas, and then provide some stats. So in that particular highlighted area, which is this, BGIS services 4 sites. There's 20 sites in total, so we have a 20% count. And then we have $180,000 off the $1 million, so 17%. So overall, the opportunity in that area is almost $1 million. So BGIS has that answer to that question. Within that territory of Edmonton, if I go to that area ID 48110.172, I've got almost $1 million of opportunity. And so that answers the questions. The geospatial problem very different to the traditional. Am I over time? Yeah, I'll be one more minute. So in terms of conclusion, it's been an exciting journey. I'm pretty much in love with Knime. I do everything on Knime. Now I don't touch Excel anymore. I've had 10 internal training sessions, 20 super users, hundreds of applications in finance. In terms of tips for those of you who are interested in rolling this out, solve well understood problems first, using basic nodes. So teach people the basic nodes that they're going to need to know. They don't need to know the data science if they're not getting into the data science. Healthy competition can help. Just make sure that it doesn't end up being unhealthy, that everyone is not sharing with each other, because that defeats the purpose. Engage senior leaders early. Like I mentioned, my CFO is actually finding me leads to teach. He wants to get the word out. More like he's helping me get the word out, which is pretty cool. There is really a lot of excitement around this. Time savings, auditability. For finance, these things are important. We're also changing the types of people that we hire as a company. These people have to be able to pick up this type of tool and run with it. Excel is no longer a baseline. And each new application generates more understanding of Knime. So as we get deeper into this, we find and uncover more exciting elements of the software. So that's it. Thank you very much. And that's my ninja symbol there.
Thank you. Any questions?
Hi, that was great. It's refreshing to see a finance team using Knime and getting out of Excel. I was just wondering, I think you touched on it, but how did you get over that inertia to try something new? Because generally people, they're comfortable with Excel. That's all they've used, especially in finance. How did you get over that, barrier?
I'm in a kind of a unique position because I've supported analytics within finance for many years, and I've been a point contact for that. But generally, people who want to get over that Excel and they want to make their lives easier, they're looking for ways to do that better. And it's really just showing them some examples of simple things that they can automate. If they're able to leave work earlier and go home to their families, that's a huge incentive. So if you can show them, hey, look, you had this problem, you're downloading CSV file and you're transforming it in Excel, and every day you spend 4 hours doing that. Here's a solution, or here's a potential solution. You're going to be able to save 2 months of your year by doing this. Spend the 1 week or so it takes to learn Knime. Try to build it, and every time you learn, you get better and better. So the next model is going to take you less time to build and whatever. I think people generally see the value, but they only see the value if you present it to them. And I've been doing sort of road shows around what I do. And people see the value and they come up to me afterwards and they want to know about it. So it's almost just presenting the opportunity and people come out of the woodwork to learn about it. There are still a lot of people that are comfortable in Excel. And with the way we're moving, you saw the exponential growth in users. They're not going to be able to sustain that going forward. It's just not feasible. So they are going to eventually have to get onto Knime.
We have time for one more question. Anybody?
Hi, thanks very much for that. Is your finance team, excuse me, using Knime in conjunction with or in spite of any financial planning and analysis or corporate performance management software?
So we are using it in conjunction with Oracle. Right now, a lot of the planning is being done in Excel. We're trying to get that into Knime. We also have a proprietary system designed for managing buildings and building operations. So we're sort of connected between Oracle, the operational system, which gives us the drivers of the financials, and Knime is sort of going to be that platform which does sort of the help to do maybe the zero-based budgeting from a driver level up to a financial level. So it's not in competition with, it's actually working along with the tools we have today.
Well, thank you, Paras, very much. That was very good.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.